At the outset of the project, our architectural team at BDP and the engineers at Arcadis worked really hard to challenge all the received thinking and assumptions about what the project was going to be. The key part of this was thinking of a very radical reorganisation of the way that the station would work, taking a previous assumption that all the circulation to and from the station would be underground, and actually flipping that round, bringing it so that the concourse is basically up above ground, suspended over the East London line, which gives many, many benefits economically, socially and environmentally.
The old ticket hall station was very cramped with a very narrow ticket hall and very tight passages and staircases. The new ticket hall design opens up the space with large staircases, wide open spaces and tall ticket hall, using lots of glass and open spaces where passengers can see where they're going and move through the station. The wayfinding also supplements this, so the passengers will have a free-flowing and smooth transition through the station.
A key part to making the whole space work in terms of bringing people through the ticket hall and into the concourse was the curving soffits of the roof as you rise up through the station. Really, really important in terms of giving some people something to look at as they're making the way up. It naturally draws people through those levels, and also making it warm and attractive to look at against what can sometimes be quite harsh and hard surfaces in station environments.
There were a number of engineering challenges faced at Whitechapel, but by far the largest of these was building the new station in and around an existing operational railway. This meant that all the construction had to happen while the station was in full use. This had many impacts on the design and construction and involved us in a series of different phasing operations to maintain the station access and emergency escape. We also had to consider the size of components and where we could have breaks in construction. And obviously we had to construct a lot of temporary works which involved construction of hoardings and crash decks and the like. We also booked some weekend possessions through TfL, where we had the station to ourselves. And we managed over 40 of these and managed to hand back the station on time each time.
An underground station has two things to cope with. You're above ground at one point and then you can below ground. One of the key points was making the transition between the two as easy as possible, the change from the bustle and street life up above to a calm environment down here for passengers to use, and the way that that is reflected in the materials and the design of the structures. We also wanted to make the links between the different levels as direct as possible, so that vertical circulation, for example, this grand bank of escalators behind me, has a direct line that comes from the daylit concourse right the way down in a very, very direct manner with the platforms on either side. Well, the Sedum Roof is a great opportunity to incorporate greenery and soften the environment. Clustered around the station are a number of buildings that do look down onto it, of course, and there's a great need to be a good neighbour with major infrastructure like this. The Sedum Roof is great for that. The Sedum Roof is effectively a traditional roof overlaid with a kind of drape of soft materials planting that will give different textures and colours through the day, through the year, according to the seasons. So it gives that interest when viewed from above, but also gives other benefits in terms of sustainable green features such as drainage, controlling the water runoff from the roof, and also acoustic insulation in terms of dealing with the noise of rain, for example, and controlling that for people within the concourses below. But one of the great things about the station bridge concept that came about was, in terms of the function and the way the spaces work, is we could get daylight and natural ventilation down into them. So I think something that's particularly striking as you come into the station is the fact that you're not coming into a sealed environment. You come off the high street and into a space that as you rise up, you can see gaps. You can see gaps between the roofs, you can see the surrounding buildings still, which is a very different environment to many other stations. So the concourse immediately is different in those ways. You can see the daylight, you can see what the weather's doing outside, and there's natural ventilation, so it's fresh air. It's not pumped air, it just feels different from those other aspects. So it is a pleasant environment in terms of the way people experience it, not only as passengers, but also what the character of that is for local residents. So another key benefit of bringing the concourse and the station bridge above the station was the ability for us to be able to create a north-south pedestrian route right the way through the station, Nothing to do with people using the trains, it's just for local residents. It connects from north to south communities that would otherwise be remote from each other because of the presence of the railway cutting through the local area. We've actually retained the station entrance as what it was originally intended to be, which has numerous benefits. One is, of course, the local community know that as a station entrance, so it's part of the surrounding city. It's also, of course, very sustainable. We're not taking something out of use and putting something new elsewhere. We're reusing a building for its original intended use. And it has a character and a presence in the surrounding area that we really wanted to trade on in the design of the station.
The materials were selected to be robust, able to stand up to the rigours of daily passenger use, long-lasting so that they didn't have to be replaced too often, low maintenance so that they kept clean with the minimum amount of maintenance and cleaning, and of course attractive. We used a palette that reflected the local area. We used granite and stone for the flooring, concrete cladding, and copper and stainless steel for cladding internally.
Positioning a new major structure, the concourse that sits directly over the overground platforms, sat within an historic Victorian cutting, which is not a beautiful piece of historic architecture, but it's got a great character and interest to it and makes a fantastic space as you experience it and move through the station. And of course, we're aiming to work as best we can with those historic materials and celebrate them, but also make sure that the new structures and materials that come in work with that in an appropriate manner. So one area where various different ideas come together is the station bridge itself, where this concourse is sat over the historic cutting. And it was always a very, very important part of this that the concourse didn't just fill the cutting, it sat within it. The structures support it, so it is clear space around either side. That gives us a very clear visual separation between the two, between new and old, but gives great opportunities that the design exploits for views between the two levels. So as you walk along the concourse, you can look down to the platforms of the overground station beneath. But also, key part of that again is this ability to bring the daylight down from above, right the way down through that glass to the platforms themselves.
The public realm design incorporates a new public square in Durward Street at the rear of the station. This will include a new raised lawn and public bicycle parking. To the front of the station, we have enlarged the forecourt, provided seating and protected bollards around the station entrance.
One of the major challenges of inserting railway infrastructure into a city, where you've got to get a lot of air basically from the tunnels up to above. So at this station we had two locations to deal with. On Durward Street, the ventilation shaft as it comes up is a very complicated and large piece of structure. And it has to sit next to some quite small scale residential, redeveloped Victorian buildings, and also Swanley School. An early part of the evolution of Durward Street shaft in particular was rearranging it internally actually, so that the louvers and the way that the air moves in and out of the structure was actually pointing away from the school rather than directly onto it.
The Durward Street shaft is clad in large format concrete panels. These panels incorporate a relief design in a series of dots. These dots represent a bell ringing pattern of one of the bells which was founded at the local Whitechapel bell ringing foundry.
And at Cambridge Heath, a similarly large structure was required, slightly taller and smaller on plan, but still a big object in its surrounding area, right next to the Grade 2 listed brewery, which of course is no longer a brewery but has a residential use. And particular references we picked up on there was the copper cladding that runs round, relating to the copper vessels, of course, that would have been key to the operation of the brewery in the past. Of course, this project is a long time from gestation to completion, and therefore seeing how early sketches and concepts can be made real is something that would be very rewarding for all the members of our design team, and also the wider project, of course. You might have a small team of architects working on this with some great engineers on the design team, but then also, of course, thinking about the many thousands of people who make an effort to design, build, construct, operate and use infrastructure like this, both from when we first became involved in the project through to completion, where we stand today, but then hopefully in the many years to come when they use this infrastructure, which is of course going to be such an important part of people's everyday lives.